What do you mean I shouldn't watch this? Scary movies don't always freak me out.
Man, oh man. I really wish that I had seen Smile in a movie theater because this is a film that genuinely terrified me. Like, so much that, like, whenever someone smiles at me now, I just feel genuinely creeped out. Like, just don't smile at me anymore, okay? Just don't show any signs of happiness because I'm just gonna be thinking of this film, Smile. I remember seeing the trailer for this movie and it honestly looked pretty underwhelming. I thought it was gonna end up being one of those unintentionally hilarious horror movies. Something along the lines of Blumhouse's Truth or Dare. Remember Truth or Dare? That absolutely hysterical horror movie. I thought it was going to end up being like something like that, but then I started reading reviews for the film, and people were actually praising the hell out of it, and I never got around to seeing it in theaters. I think because I was just so caught up in other things last year. We had so many good, solid horror movies last year. I mean, we had stuff like Terrifier 2, Pearl, X. Man, I wish I had seen Smile, like, with an audience, because I bet this would have been the ideal horror movie to see at a movie theater, because, yeah, this film is the first horror film in a while to really unnerve me, like, rock me to my core, and I was thinking about it, and there's a number of people out there who probably didn't think much of this film. They probably thought it was an above-average horror film, you know, with some spooky elements, but nothing truly outstanding or revolutionary. But horror is a very subjective genre. I mean, I've met people who are genuinely terrified of the film Gremlins. I think Gremlins is a really funny, entertaining movie, but there are people who are genuinely terrified by it. The same with the 1990 miniseries It. I find that to be another unintentionally hilarious product, but there are people who claim that Tim Curry's Pennywise is the most terrifying thing they've ever seen. I may not see it, but I can understand why some people do. And actually, a little while back, I made a movie called The Top 5 Horror Films That Actually Managed to Scare Me, and I got some comments on that video. There were people questioning why, you know, I could possibly be scared by films such as Sinister, The Blair Witch Project. To them, those films are average and they're not scary in the slightest. But again, horror is subjective, and if a movie is touching upon things that are very personal to you, then it can have quite the effect, and Smile definitely did that for me. Today, I'm going to be talking about all the reasons why 2022 Smile is so scary.
Hi. I know you're nervous. I just want to have a chat.
I'm seeing something no one else can see except for me. It's smiling at me. Oh my God!
So yes, welcome to yet another episode of Round the Clock Frights. My name is Josh. So, before I get into all the reasons why this film is genuinely scary, let's go over the premise of the movie. This isn't going to be an in-depth review. I'm not going to be, analyzing, this movie bit by bit, scene for scene. I'm just going to be listing off all the reasons why it scared me on a personal level, and why it probably scared a lot of other people as well. So the premise of this movie, you have a young woman, played by Sosie Bacon, the daughter of Kevin Bacon, the legendary Kevin Bacon, the man who got slaughtered by Pamela Voorhees. So she is a young psychiatrist whose goal in life is to help people with their mental struggles, and she meets this young woman who claims to have seen something really terrifying, this entity that has just been continuously smiling at her. And what ends up happening is that this young woman ends up killing herself, slashes her neck right in front of Sosie Bacon, and it turns out that Sosie Bacon has been infected, shall we say cursed, by this entity that no one else can see, but it can take the form of anyone she knows, and it's been called the trauma entity by the horror community, and for good reason, because this thing just loves to see Sosie Bacon go absolutely insane. Like, it takes great pleasure out of that, and the rest of the movie is pretty much her trying to solve the mystery of this thing and trying to convince her current fiance and her ex-boyfriend, blah blah blah, that this thing actually exists and it is out to kill her. So that's the premise of the movie. Now, I actually did make a list here, boys and ghouls. I made a list as to why Smile actually scared me, and I'm going to discuss these reasons with you now. First off, the opening shot of this movie. Okay, so the opening shot, you see a close-up of this dead woman's face. She is dead, lying in a bed, and she has this very just eerie look to her, and the camera slowly backs up. We see the rest of the room. She has a number of empty pill bottles next to the bed, and right away, just looking at this opening shot, you just feel genuinely uncomfortable. I mean, seeing a dead body just staring at you, with its cold, lifeless eyes, that is just so eerie and terrifying, and it sets up the mood perfectly, and that's what an opening shot of a movie should do. The opening shot of a movie should tell you everything you need to know about the movie and what kind of ride you are in for. And the opening shot just really, really managed to sell this movie for me. And it also hints at the idea of mental health, because we see all these empty pill bottles, so we can assume that the woman who is dead had some mental struggles, and it turns out that this woman is the mother of Sosie Bacon, and she committed suicide. She took too many pills, and it ended up killing her. And Sosie Bacon has become haunted, by this fact, because she was a young girl at the time, and she didn't do anything to save her poor mother. But yes, the opening shot, just right off the bat, just establishes how scary this movie is going to be.
I need to find an explanation for what happened.
It's smiling at me. Smiling at me.
You're going to die! You're going to die!
This film focuses on two really big, uncomfortable subjects: mental health and childhood trauma. For me personally, as someone who has, struggled with some mental problems, I mean, I definitely overcome them, but I know what it's like to hear voices in your head, voices that are telling you things that aren't necessarily true. Voices that will tell you bad things about yourself and will make you very paranoid of the world around you. I've definitely dealt with all of that. It's no secret. I don't see the need to cover anything up. So this film was very, very personal for me. And, just the idea that there is this entity that is mocking you for your mental struggles. I mean, just taking great pleasure out of the idea that you are suffering. It is just so scary. Yeah, scary. I'm going to be saying that word a lot because this film is scary, especially, for someone like me. It's very personal. And yeah, to have, just this entity, to have someone smile at you just endlessly is very, very creepy because, we were raised at a young age to pick up on social cues. And if someone is just smiling at you constantly, like invading your personal space and just smiling at you, it can come across as very ominous and unsettling, and you feel as if you have been violated. So just the idea that the antagonist of this movie is something that will never stop following you and will never stop smiling at you, no matter how miserable you are. Oh man, Smile, you definitely did a number on me because, like It Follows. It Follows was a movie that dealt very heavily with the idea of, being followed and stalked by something. You can't escape this thing, it will follow you everywhere. And, speaking of this entity, I did do some behind the scenes research, and apparently there was no CGI enhancements, when it came to the actor smiling. The director actually had the actor show him a number of creepy smiles, and he told them which smiles were the best and most effective. So when you see someone smiling creepily in this movie, there's no tampering, there's no CGI trickery. It's genuine. Unlike Blumhouse's Truth or Dare, where all the smiling characters in that movie looked like malfunctioning Snapchat filters. Just the fact that the smiles in this are real, it doesn't feel fake or phony. And I actually do have a quote from this director. He said, "We walk around with traumas and to not let anyone in. We will wear a smile as a mask. I wanted this smile to be a mask to hide evil's true intentions." So yeah, the happiest people in the world can also be the saddest. And people often smile to hide their true feelings because they want to come across as happy and pleasant, and they're afraid if they show their true nature, then people are going to judge them, and they're not going to take their mental struggles seriously.
Why is it that everybody else who's seen it is dead and you're alive? I've seen it too.
You?
Get away from me! How long between each victim's death?
None of them survived longer than a week.
Today's my 4th day.
The filmmaking techniques in this movie. Okay, another reason why this film is so scary. There's a number of shots in this movie where you'll have a singular character, standing in an empty space, and they just feel so alone and helpless. There's a really great sequence where Sosie Bacon is alone at her house, and she is in the kitchen, and she hears something, and she looks over at the other side of the room. The camera slowly pans to the left, and we see a smiling figure just standing silently in the shadows. No jump scares, no cheap horror tricks. This thing is just standing silently. There's no ominous music. It's just complete silence, accompanied by the image of this terrifying thing standing in a dark corner. And there are so many sequences like that. Sequences where something sinister will just be lurking in the background. And it's a technique that I've seen in recent horror films. Director Mike Flanagan has actually used this to great effect. He'll often have something evil or sinister just standing quietly in the background. There's no music, this thing might be out of focus, but you still see it, and you feel unnerved by it because it is just present in the room. In addition, often when something evil in this movie is, smiling at the main character, it is perfectly centered in frame, so we're forced to stare directly at it. We feel completely helpless, like there is no escape. The entity will often be framed in the center, and so we feel as if we have no choice but to look it directly in the eye. There's that scene with the therapist where, where Sosie Bacon is visited by this therapist who, wants to help her, and then it turns out that it's actually the demon in disguise, and we get this shot where the demon is just looking directly into the camera, and it puts on that really fake, eerie smile, and oh yeah, I would have run from the theater at that point. That is just so effective. Yeah, this film just does such an amazing job of making you feel just completely helpless. And the character in this movie, Sosie Bacon, she truly feels alone, and just the idea that her loved ones refuse to help her with her struggles, or they just choose to ignore her completely. I like to compare it to classic horror films like A Nightmare on Elm Street or Child's Play, because in A Nightmare on Elm Street, all the teen characters in that movie, none of the adults believe that they're being stalked by Freddy Krueger. They are left to deal with this thing on their own. All the adults think they're crazy, and it makes them feel much more, helpless and vulnerable. We fear for them because they feel completely alone and no one believes them. In Child's Play, young Andy Barkley, when he realizes that Chucky is actually alive and possessed by a serial killer, he tries to tell his mother and some other adults, but they don't believe him because he's just a small child. So you really fear for this kid, and you fear of what Chucky will do to him because no one is going to help him. Same thing in this movie. It's such a great storytelling method, because if a character in a horror movie feels completely isolated from the rest of the world, then we'll fear for them even more so. This film does a really good job at that, and by the end of the movie, Sosie Bacon goes back to her old dilapidated house to confront this thing, and we get one of those fake, one of those false horror endings where we think everything is just fine and peachy, but it turns out not to be the case. It's dragging me to hell all over again. It pulls the rug out from under you. This film definitely does not have a happy ending. And speaking of the ending, okay, the creature in this movie, yeah, it is genuinely terrifying. It has a very unique, scary design. It has all these different, malformed, jaws attached to its face, and it looks completely skinless, and it just has this pair of just bulbous eyes, and it's a practical effect too. I heard that the filmmaker Parker Finn actually reached out to some of his childhood idols, some visual effects artists that he had been wanting to collaborate with, so they created the practical monster for this movie, and man, it is... I put it in the thumbnail of this video because, this movie's been out for a while. Are you really worried about spoilers at this point? This thing is scary. It is just scary. And yes, I have actually had nightmares about this thing because it's a scary looking creature. And yeah, I just commend the filmmakers for the design of this thing because, man, oh, what a movie monster. I applaud them.
I have to face it.
How does it make you feel?
Okay, so speaking of this ending, I was on the fence about it at first. I had to think about it a lot because initially I didn't like the idea of this entity defeating the main character and forcing her to kill herself, because I kind of like the idea of her confronting her childhood trauma and ultimately, coming to terms with it. I thought that would have been a bit more potent and it would have been a much more hopeful ending. And I get it. Horror movies got a horror. I mean, horror movies often have sad, unhappy endings, but I think that kind of ending would have made it a bit more satisfying for me to see her ultimately, confront her childhood trauma and deal with it. I think, I don't know, I think that would have been a bit more appropriate for the narrative, but then I thought about it a little bit more. I mean, it could go back, it could tie into the idea that mental struggles will never leave us, and you can do everything you can, but they'll still be around, and they can be very difficult to defeat and overcome. It's just in this case, she doesn't defeat it, it literally kills her. Sorry, my alarm just went off, but it literally kills her. So I guess I'm still kind of split about the ending. I wasn't entirely satisfied, and some people have said that it just turns into a typical, monster movie by the end. But I don't know. I mean, it still gave us that really terrifying creature, so I mean, it at least had that ace up its sleeve. And as far as other sequences that I thought were very, very, very effective, I actually have 3 in particular. So there's a scene where Rose, is talking to her current fiance in a car, and she's telling him about this thing, what's happening to her, and he just looks at her as if she is the craziest person he has met in his life. He isn't interested in helping her at this point because it would be too inconvenient for him. He's fine with the relationship as long as things are nice and easy going, but when it comes to actually helping her with her problems, he doesn't want to deal with them. So he kind of kicks her to the curb, and he calls upon the therapist character to deal with it, essentially. The birthday party scene, oh my god. So Rose is invited to attend her nephew's birthday party, and she picks him up this cute little train set, and she thinks that she's gonna be the cool aunt because she's giving her nephew this cool present. Earlier in the movie, it's established that she has lost her cat, her pet cat. So yeah, she's at the birthday party, watching her nephew unwrap this present, and we see this terrified expression on his face, and lo and behold, her dead cat is inside this box. And that scene, it was borderline funny, but the reason it worked was because of Sosie Bacon's performance, because she is just so confused, like, why is my dead cat inside my nephew's birthday present? And everyone around her just looks at her as if she is absolutely insane. Going back to the idea that she has become truly isolated from the rest of the world. And the last scene that I thought was very effective was the scene with the sister, where she goes to talk to her sister, and her sister just calls her crazy and doesn't want to help her at all. The trailer for this movie spoiled one of the better scares in this thing, because she goes to her car, and we see her sister walking towards the car, and for a second her sister's face disappears. She knocks on the window, and then boom, her head just like detaches and just swings around. And oh my god, that was spoiled in the trailer, and that was a legitimate good jump scare. And man, I wish that hadn't been spoiled, because oh man, my reaction to that scene would have been amazing if I hadn't already seen it in the freaking trailer. So yeah, maybe don't be so spoiler heavy when it comes to making your trailers, Hollywood. Leave us with some things to be excited for. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyway, guys, I understand if you weren't really scared by this movie. I get it. I've heard from a number of people already. They were like, Josh, that movie was pretty average. Why would something like that scare you? I mean, there were so many better horror movies that came out in 2022. Like the ones I had listed earlier, like Pearl, X, Terrifier 2, and it's true. There were better horror movies that came out in 2022. But this movie scared me on a personal level. And I'm sure it's done the same thing for a number of other horror fans out there. And guys, if this movie scared you as well, I would love to hear, your thoughts. I'd love to chat with you about this movie, so definitely leave your comments down below. And thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of the movie Smile. the first horror film in a while that really got to me. Yeah, I'll just be honest. It scared me. But yes, guys. Apart from Smile, I'd love to hear which horror films managed to scare you as well. And, you know, definitely check out that other video I was mentioning, the top 5 horror films that actually managed to scare me. I put a lot of work into that video, and, you know, please check out the other content on this channel. I put a lot of work into these videos and would really appreciate your support. But guys, thank you so much again. If you liked what you saw here, please subscribe to my channel, Round the Clock Frights, for more horrific content. I got some very exciting things in the work. Scream 6 is just around the corner. I can't wait to see that. It's one of my most anticipated horror movies of the year. And thank you so much again, guys, for your support. Have a very scary day, boils and ghouls, and